apologize about the confusion with the links today. We have changed the new registration process. So please watch for an email in the Disaster Coalition Strategies group. I think we need to clarify which link is for the topics call and which is for this systems change call. So thank you. If you have this on your calendar and you made it in, then you're on the right link for this call. So hopefully it will show on everyone's calendar appropriately now. All right. Thank you. I think that there is a lot of work that we can do, and to kind of follow up on the conversation about keeping meetings open. There is a bill, actually, AB 316, that would help extend some of the protections that are in place with the Brown Act. The Brown Act is currently in a state of kind of suspense where it will allow for remote meetings to continue. However, those are going to be expiring at the end of this month. So there's a lot of work to do, I think, to try to keep meetings open, especially in these remote environments. But it's my understanding, Dan, that the Capitol will still continue to operate as they are with remote opportunities, because I believe that's correct. So perhaps we want to look at, one of the issues I think that we can really lean into, though, is the importance of keeping all public meetings as open and accessible as possible. And I think that directly affects a lot of the work that we're doing. And June, I'm not sure if you're aware of how that might interplay with the Public Utilities Commission, but I think that this is something maybe that we want to really kind of raise up the flagpole very, very quickly, depending on what that looks like in the future, because I'm not an expert there.
Yeah, I think you bring back a difficult memory, but Marilyn was prompting me to testify at the CPUC regarding the accessibility of Uber and Lyft, which was another one of her major advocacy goals. And I said to her, Marilyn, I just can't be spending 13 hours of commute time for a 5-minute testimony or less. Why can't I do it remotely? And she fought that fight, and I think did create that option, but I'm not sure it was ongoing. And I think what we need is ongoing access and acknowledgement. And many of us, whether we have a disability or not, are not going to commute 13 hours for 2 minutes of testimony. It's just not realistic, and it really discriminates against public participation. Back to you. Sorry, just had to say that.
Yeah, I think that is really, really good. I also see that we have a comment from Bruce.
Hi, everybody. Hey, I totally get where you're coming from on that, June, because yeah, traveling all day to make a really short comment seems kind of silly. But one of the things that I want to caution about is I honestly, and this is just a personal belief, that in-person testimony, we live in such a technologically advanced world. It's so easy to tell somebody no over the phone and on a Zoom call, and it's not quite as easy to look them in the eye and tell them no. I don't know. I think that when we can, I think it's more effective, because you get more of a different aspect of when somebody's in the room with you than you do just on a call. I don't know. I don't know what anybody else thinks about it, but that's my 2 cents anyway.
It's definitely a challenge. All right, so I'd like to take some time to brainstorm some ideas that we can send out so just so that you all know, the Disability Organizing Network, the DOnetwork, every year sends out an annual survey to the entire disability community. And on that survey, we identify what the urgent topics are for the year ahead. And we are in the midst of putting together that survey now. And I would love to have some feedback from this coalition, even though here at CFILC, we actually have 2 programs that work very heavily in this area. The primary participant in this work is the Disability Disaster Access and Readiness Program, or DDAR program, that many of you might be familiar with. The DOnetwork is the statewide systems change hub, meaning that it is a source of funding put aside to promote positive systems change within the state of California. So we're kind of working together here because it's important that systems change be made in all areas, including disability, disaster access, and readiness. So I'd like to maybe hear from all of us what we see as, if there was a survey presented to you, what would be some of the things that you could rank? So what would be the list of priorities that we would want to know from the community, just which are the most pertinent or most important? And these are things that we want to try to visualize, things that are accomplishable, within the next year to maybe 2 or 3 years. But I think it's really important that we look at what legislative changes we can actually have. I know that one of them was the discussion that we were having, which is how can we notify people about durable medical equipment, that battery-powered durable medical equipment, that they might need backup solutions, and to connect with the Disability Disaster Access and Readiness program and the centers in their area. But what others do we have on the plate? And June, I know you might have a few, but I'd love to open this up for everyone.
Maybe I can prime the pump by saying, Russell, one of my pet peeves are not CF, but other organizations who do a yearly survey without recognizing that what's already on our plate that's going to be, a year to a decade worth of work. So I urge you to have a question that says, these are our long-term commitments, and we're interested in how you rate them, but they don't fall off our plate after a year.
So let's identify some of our long-term commitments too, because maybe there are smaller systems change priorities within those long-term, what we see as long-term goals too. And some of this is for my extreme benefit too, as I am newer to the disaster access and readiness conversations.
This is Sydney Pickern with DDAR. Thanks, Russell, for making space for this conversation. I mean, I think with my background, and of course, June knows as well that in terms of local government response, I think we know that local government can do better in terms of providing accessible plan preparedness and response for people with disabilities in our communities. And so I think, I'm not sure in terms of if this is like a legislative discussion or just what we're thinking about in terms of action steps for the independent living centers. But I think we definitely we want to continue to help the DDARCs and the independent living centers develop relationships with local emergency planning and response departments so that we can continue to try to force ourselves to the tables and be experts in the accessible planning and response in this area. So
Thanks, Sid. So what other things can kind of get us to where we need to be? And is there something even this coming legislative cycle that might be really strategic for us to accomplish?
yeah, I think, you know, Russell, this is Sydney again. I think in terms of conversations that we've had, I think transportation has always been something that has come up for our community in terms of access before, during, and after emergencies. And I think we're continuing to put our heads together and thinking about, you know, maybe there's a piece of transportation related legislation that could bolster local government responsibility in terms of providing transportation access before, during, and after emergencies.
Sydney, can I expand on two of the things you said? One is just to get a little more maybe specific. I would like to see a conceptualization of FAST, functional assistance service teams in California. And I'd like to see that whole structure, you know, moved so that teams come out of disability-led organizations, which was the original intent, that people who really know disability and know some of the nuances and the complexities of planning for, dealing with, and surviving emergencies are the ones that are part of the response, and that there be a mechanism for also reimbursement to disability-led organizations for that involvement in emergencies. Second, what Sid said, I think we need to have a tactic, because Marilyn is now gone. Who's going to take over her and her fight for the CPUC to acknowledge that their oversight of Lyft and Uber and others of those have to have an accessibility component built into that service? That's a real detailed level of expertise that Marilyn had. I mean, I read the testimony, I read some of the background papers. That's going to take an enormous amount of work to pick up where she left off, but we've got to do that. And that's only one little piece of transportation in an emergency and the evacuation aspects.
Thanks, June. I think that part of this also ties into something that I saw discussed in the listserv earlier too, which was that, you know, the CPUC really limits this conversation to us talking about disasters in terms of public safety power shutoffs only. And I think maybe, you know, that to me feels like the urgent work is expanding the scope of what a disaster looks like, right? Like what is a disaster, I think is also a big piece of this question. So
can I just add the way you say, just for others who may not be aware, that the recognition and the good work of the CPUC in holding utilities accountable has been in the area of public PSPS, public safety power shutoffs. But there's been little to no recognition that during the catastrophic events, these are not short-term issues. We've got a plan for situations like what is occurring in Louisiana and in Texas, long-term power outages, and how people are going to, make it through those as well.
Thank you. And of course, it wouldn't be a conversation in California without also talking about the wildfires and the impacts. And of course, we have federal, level assistance there too. But I think that, really kind of helping the state through the CPUC envision a broader context of what disaster looks like is really important. And also tying transportation so closely to that is also a great idea. So I'm hearing that those will definitely go on the survey. Are there other ideas or thoughts?
So June, this is Bruce again. As far as FAST team goes, when I was in Orange County, they sought out Dale McIntosh Center and asked for advice on the FAST team. And I ended up actually joining the county FAST team, and they integrated us into training and membership. But not every county is like that. San Bernardino just too busy doing other things. And but I know that if you have a county that's open to it, it's really a good thing to get that training to the FAST team members, and they get pretty good training as it is. But we have a lot to add to that part of the county response.
I agree, Bruce, but I agree with you. But unfortunately, Orange County and Alameda County in the past, and maybe around where San Jose is, they've been more leaders in this area. But if you look at the statistics of the number of counties that have been trained repeatedly and have not been able to maintain this, it's striking.
So I'm seeing something in chat here. I will read voice. Joe Gerber has said the CPUC has current dockets addressing power backup options, including low-cost electrical isolation methods that allow for whole home backup power via EV or stationary battery generator. And then there is a link. Joe, I would, with your permission, I'd like to maybe give you a second to talk about that. And also, if you're okay with it, I'd like to reshare this chat in the larger chat with everyone.
That sounds great.
Great. Great. Go ahead, Joe. Joe, if you want to elaborate too, this is a good time to feel free to.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share with the group just the fact that the CPUC is evaluating these options, obviously not just for the disabled community in particular, but for all current investor-owned utility ratepayers to establish basically their own home microgrid. So there are still several fundamental questions that are still being answered. And, if I had to speculate, I'd probably have to say that we're probably still at least 6 months away from actually having like a marketable product that could be installed in homes. But that would be well within the traditional fire season that we typically see here in California. So, and I can keep the group posted on those legal dockets. That's really an easy thing for us to do since we're paying attention anyway.
Hey, Joe, June Chaos, would this be something that would be affordable by people on, low income people or, fixed income people?
That's a great question. I believe that the CPUC commissioners would probably say that they're targeting a $1,500 to $2,000 price point for these devices, and there are several manufacturers out there with the intellectual property that would allow them to participate in that market. So that there will be some brand competition, and hopefully that'll suppress prices further as volumes increase down into the hundreds of dollars. The big idea with a lot of these low cost isolation methods is really trying to pull as much of the labor cost out of the equation, out of the process, and really try to establish more investment in the capital equipment. The equation reads the opposite way right now. Most of the $7,000 to $10,000 to even $15,000 cost of a sub panel to isolate your home, including an automatic transfer switch and a bunch of other equipment that needs to be installed by a licensed electrician over an extended period of time. These low cost isolation methods are going to be a much faster install, and will probably be based at the meter socket. So there are still going to be some challenges with multifamily situations and other things like that. But it's going to be a huge leap forward just in establishing the idea that that individual homes, individual meters really can be microgrids unto themselves, and then theoretically those ratepayers will be able to control the source of power as they see fit. There's going to be significantly more utility involvement at first. And then as we learn more about how these devices actually behave as part of the overall electric grid, we'll be able to open up more and more features and options and things like that with them.
Well, thanks. That could be a tremendous step forward.
Yeah, it's our belief that just the democratization of that generation source, it's going to give the individual a lot more power. So that's really the exciting thing. And for those that already have electric vehicles, that's actually a portable source of power that you can actually go out and source power at some resource center, let's just say, during a wildfire, and then actually bring that power back home, either on a regular basis or an emergency basis. So yeah, lots and lots of good options.
That's very cool. Joe, has there been any talk this June again? The CPUC has always been a bit of an enigma to me because it has such different vocabulary, different rules, different language. And I always had to rely on, Marilyn Golden or Melissa Crescent to understand what the heck was going on, because your language is so unique and different and non-parallel to other, for example, working with government. Is there any talk among you all to make that more user-friendly?
I see we're not getting a direct response quickly, but I also want to point out.
Joe, that was for you. I don't want to put you in the spot, but anything would help.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were addressing the group there. I would not anticipate them becoming significantly more user-friendly in the near term for the layperson. But having said that, they have a gigantic mandate. They have a ton of things to be concerned about, lots of which are integrated with one another. We were just talking about electric vehicles. You know, the transportation electrification process in and of itself is a gigantic, public issue right now. So then, just trying to deal with the fact that they have so much more attention from a wider variety of constituents within the state makes the smaller voices just that much harder to hear. And so we've been paying attention to, not only disaster and emergency planning for a long time, but also the fact that changing that character of the grid, like I was talking about earlier, is a big change for especially the investor-owned utilities, which are big businesses, obviously owned by investors. And they're really the ones that are going to take significant periods of time to change their cultures to become more integrated with the population as a whole, with the citizen population. So the grid is going to become a resource that's more of a shared public resource that's not going to be controlled by for-profit corporations. And that's really what we see the CPUC as trying to accomplish. Is really trying to integrate voices on a more regular basis, but it is going to take time. So you guys having a representative at their sessions being vocal, it really can make a difference whether or not the terminology. So I'd highly recommend, even if you're not comfortable, still sitting in on the sessions. They're usually very time efficient. Because again, they do have a lot to do, and they have, very clear discipline about sticking to agendas and whatnot. So you can pay attention, invest the time and energy, like you were talking about earlier. You're not going to be taking 13 hours to do 2 minutes of testimony. It's a much more efficient process than that. So I'd highly recommend it.
So sounds like maybe some community training, at least a little bit about the CPUC might be a really helpful thing to get people engaged in at least understanding the situation. And we know that certainly user friendliness is extremely lacking. I also see a little bit of text in the chat, and wondering, Shana, would you mind helping out with revoicing there?
Absolutely, Russell. Good morning, everyone. Shana, CFILC. This is from Dawn Albrecht. And Dawn writes, on the transportation note, I have started a conversation with a non-emergency medical transport provider who is contracted with Partnership to take people on Medi-Cal to appointments. I feel they would be the perfect option to respond to assist with evacuations during the warning stage. Warning is capitalized. Before it becomes a mandatory evacuation, as they will not be able to go into these areas at that time. The operations manager is willing to discuss this as a possibility. They serve all of Northern California and sometimes will bring in drivers and vehicles from other areas if there are not enough drivers to meet the need in a particular county. I would like to pursue this with our local emergency management officials and others to explore this as a possibility. Of course, I would need to gather a lot more information in order to create a valid proposal, but I think it's worth looking into as far as getting possible funding from the state to help compensate medical transport providers who are willing to commit to this. End of message.
Wow. Hey, Dawn, right on. I've often thought about those resources, Junior. Because there are contractual arrangements with a lot of health plans for, what do they call it? NEMT, non-emergency transportation, something or other. And there are a lot of national providers that have, regional affiliates that could be tapped by contract by the state to help, or region to help with these emergency evacuations. So right on.
June, Dawn has added to her message in the chat box, and I will read it now. Dawn writes, I am the ground supervisor for the transport company in this region. We had several clients who could not evacuate on their own during the fires. End of message.
Right.
Question I've got for the group too is, how are we tracking these failures whenever there is something that is not successful or someone is not able to obtain the access that they need during any kind of disaster situation? I don't know, Sid or June, if you have any thoughts, but I'd love to hear.
Yeah, Russell, this is Sydney. I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think this comes down also just to education and in terms of, understanding what your rights are during an emergency event. I know there are some, coming from a legal background, of course, I know there are some frontline legal service providers that do receive calls in terms of, especially for support, in terms of financial support before and after a disaster. But I think that, even from a frontline legal service provider point of view too, for those folks to also be able to do some outreach into the communities and make education a priority in this area. I think, of course.
How you doing?
Mr. Mario,
Yes, sir.
I got Michael on the line, but he wants you to please do inventory of.
Shayna, would you?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, I'm going to mute. Thank you.
Russell, the other thing I wanted to say, and a lot of the folks know this on this call, is that, through the DDAR program, everyone who enrolls is eligible for personalized preparedness assistance. And I think, in that way, the DDAR program really does have access to information in terms of not only what the disaster response resources are available in the community, but also, if the DDARC or the Independent Living Center walks through a personalized preparedness plan with someone and then the consumer says, actually, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know how I'm going to get out during a disaster event. I think those types of responses as well are also something that is documented. And so I think in that way, the DDAR program is definitely a resource to gather some of this data.
Yeah, I would add, Sydney, and based on Dawn's comments in the chat and your question, Russell, we don't have enough data on a lot of this, but we know anecdotally that this happens over and over again, and we can't discount that. I think we need to, one of our, at least I'm pushing for change in the state contracts with public health plans so that they have to play a role in working with their members on their emergency plans, which includes a realistic look at not only how they would exit their home, but how they would evacuate the area and what's realistic in terms of their plan. And I think this connects the dots to what Dawn was saying was, is there a way for the health plan to link their emergency, their transport services to somebody who's identified while working with a case manager in their health plans that they indeed have no way to realistically evacuate an area.
That's really great. And I'm not sure, is there anyone on the call that might be able to conceptualize what working with the health plans instead of, so getting out of the CPUC conversation a little bit, backing out, and maybe instead looking from a regulatory lens on health, and what would a systems change look like? Where would we start in that direction? Who might some of our like influential, what are the levers of power there that could be moved?
The levers of power is that the state of California is currently recompeting the contracts with health plans. And the lever would be that the state integrate into those RFPs, which stands for request for proposals, that the plans,
Well, I can't get the audio to work on this thing.
that the plans specifically address their role with members in emergencies. And I've been writing a lot of these ideas up in draft form, so I have a lot of this, Russell, but
Right.
hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I also noticed that Carolyn was trying to, I think, offer something. Carolyn, I'm not sure if you were trying to contribute to our conversation, but we did hear you for a moment. If you'd like to speak up. We did have you.
My connection's kind of funny today, Russell, so I'll pass. I'll try and comment a little bit later here.
Okay. All right. No problem. No problem. All right. I think this may be kind of a natural time to kind of pivot back to our conversation about what does it look like to keep folks informed who are using durable medical equipment, because we know that that's also a major issue. And I want to circle back to kind of putting together that guidepost for what would be the thing that we should be notifying. What would the notice look like? Because I do feel strongly that this is something that we can push the DME providers to give out to the community when distributing devices.
I'm gonna need to drop off, Russell, so I just wanna say, to me, it would look like very clear instructions when DME is replaced or repaired or delivered for the first time as to what are the emergency procedures? How would you power your device in a long-term power outage? Can you get a converter to work with your car battery? What are the options? Very clearly stated. And then a direct connect back to the payer that, if you're delivering a powered wheelchair, then these instructions go with it in a format that's usable by the person it's delivered to. And also, if there's a cost involved, some advocacy back to the payer, which mostly means the health plan and their obligation to maybe pay for whatever that backup might look like, a second battery, some kind of a converter, many of the things we've talked about over the months in this space.
Yeah, I agree. Any additional thoughts? I'd love to open the space up to some folks who haven't had an opportunity to share too. Is there any part of this conversation that that you feel that some real needed change or community change needs to occur?
Hey, Russell,
Todd,
this is
Todd, go ahead.
yeah, this is Todd Holloway, and I think it's June had brought up some really intriguing issues around the health plans being involved with this. We're always struggling looking for funding, no matter where we are, and remote or urban settings, when it comes to all of the things that we need to do to be prepared for disasters. And I think leveraging that and having that at least on the forefront of our minds whenever we're starting to engage with other potential partners is important. June, am I barking up the wrong tree when I say that when it comes to, including our DME and assistive technology needs into the healthcare plans and having those folks at the table am I headed on the right track?
Yes, yeah, and I would add one thing I've been thinking about a lot around this area is in emergencies, we tend to drain the loan closets of disability-led organizations and AT assistive technology organizations, and there's no current reimbursement to replenish that stuff because people are relying on some of those services on a sunny day, and if they're totally used up in emergencies without any support for replenishing all that. I feel like sometimes we're doing the work of the government, and the government has to begin to take some responsibility for, how this is going to continually occur, if that makes sense.
Thanks, June. This is Todd. The other frustration we have here, and I'm guessing it's the same in California as Washington State, is that our AT programs within the state are really been nailed hard as far as budgets go. Their capacity is limited. Is that something that you're seeing there? And is there anything collectively we can do to join together and support them being more resilient and possibly being able to do some of exactly what you say, having the replacement equipment available right away if we have to use it up? Where is the replacement going to come from?
Yeah, I think it's the same old answer. It's got to go on our priority list. It's got to be on the list of all the AT assistive technology organizations that have roles in emergencies. It's one more really big advocacy piece that Russell has to go on your list, and it's going to take a long-term battle to get this done.
Hello. Dawn and I actually know each other, and she private messaged me some more chat, which I copied and pasted into the chat. It's for the group. I don't know if someone wants to read it, but she wanted to say something else.
Hi, John. Thank you. I'll go ahead and read it. This is Shayna. So the message from Dawn reads, sorry, my microphone seems to be having problems. I wanted to second what June said about the
Oh,
fast.
It's the next one. There's one further down from Dawn. Starts with, I used to do a 2-day trainings
you.
workshops. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Here we go. This is from Melissa Norman, which is from Dawn. I used to do a 2-day trainings workshops for regional center clients and their service providers in Humboldt, Lake, Mendocino, and Del Norte counties. I walk people through a 7-step emergency plan that addresses local hazards, risks, evacuations, local and more distant temporary relocation options, medications and medical equipment, family, pets, and service animals, maps, members of their support teams, etc. I would be happy to work with others to expand giving these presentations to others so they have more tools when assisting others in creating their own site-specific, client-specific plans. At the end of the workshop, we would often do a tabletop exercise that then opened the discussion to how different agencies could help one another and each other's clients during an event, which could lead to creating MUOs among them. I'd also write a recommendation report at the end and be available for individual or agency consultations. I would also like to see the converters available. I have clients who end up staying in their cars during a wildfire event, and the converters would be a great help to them. And a message.
That MUOs was actually supposed to be memorandums of understanding, MOUs. Sorry about that.
Thank you. And then Todd Holloway has written a kudo in the chat box, and he says to everyone, I love the heavy lifting you have done with the PS partnership.
This is Sydney Pickering. I just wanted to say it's great to hear from Dawn in terms of the type of organizing she's doing in the community up there in TCIL's area. And I think, that was one of the things I was trying to get at in the beginning of this conversation was just, we would love to hear also just from other independent living centers or other folks on the ground in terms of the relationships that you all have been able to build with your local emergency management organizations, local government, and if that's, if local government hasn't been responding, if you also would, be able to benefit from some trainings in this area in terms of building these relationships.
This is a great idea, I think. Thank you, Sydney. I think sometimes we're so, down in the weeds of trying to provide the direct support that maybe we don't back up for a moment to really analyze where are the partners in this work, and that we shouldn't have to shoulder, a lot of what we're shouldering is because maybe there's not that best connect. And if we, the system, can determine where those points are failing, where they're weak, or more importantly, where they're strong, maybe in a certain region. Maybe we can develop models too that would work statewide, right? so there would be a stronger connection. And I'd love to work with the DDAR team to maybe figure out how to do some of our internal kind of data collection, because it's honestly, most problems can be solved whenever you can demonstrate that there's a numeric like demand, like that there's actual demand. And a lot of times in our community, in the disability community at large, there's just not a measuring of that data because of various reasons. We don't have a good way to really know who and where the people in our community are. We just have an idea that it's, according to the CDC, approximately 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people. So that's a lot of people, right? So I think if we dive deeper and take the time to say, where are these other parts that aren't working? Like, where is there a FAST team that's not functioning, or many other things? I think we can really move the needle on that. And so I'd love to work with our team here to maybe see what an internal survey looks like for those of you at ILCs. And I'm wondering if any of the ILC partners have any feedback on this or any thoughts. Do you collect? Is there something you're already like, maybe you're making a running list of like things I wish, connections I wish we had, or connections that don't work well and I don't understand why? Pilar has shared in chat that at Community Access Center down in Riverside, they attended an emergency preparedness expo and were able to get out over 150 PPE bags. That's great. So that's a really good, measuring things like this too is really important, I think. Whenever we know when we have a community event that is distributing information of that, like that. Because that's getting the info out into the community that your center is engaged on the issue and that the DDARC exists. Carolyn.
I just wanted to add that due to the emergencies that are happening in our northern region, there's a lot of county level outreach activity.
Mhm.
So we have developed relationships, not just with the county overall, but we've taken it to the level of approaching each individual department within the county structures. Because what we've found is that just contacting, for example, social services or the Department of Employment is not enough. If you do, for example, arrange a meeting with the Department of Healthcare, there are typically 4 or 5 different departments within the Department of Healthcare, and you're not necessarily getting to everyone who has the ability to get that outreach out there. So in our contact list, for example, with Butte County, we have probably 6 different Butte County departments, and we've done individual outreach with each department because each department oftentimes has, 10, 15 members working, and they're not talking to the other departments to understand what we're doing with this program.
That's great to hear that level of communication is happening. And it's great too that you identified the problem and that you felt like that the departments weren't communicating. So to develop we're going to touch all of them type approach is really, really effective, I think. Anyone else have have something to add to the conversation. What are some things you're doing to de-silo the conversations? Like what are some strategic conversations like those that Carolyn shared that you're having to help broaden the conversation?
Bruce, I hate to put you on the spot, but I know that you have a lot of local emergency response connections. I don't know if you want to speak to your experience.
Well, I'm with the CERT group locally, and I'm also with the local COAD. So we're constantly being notified through one way or another of things that are going on in the county. And so having those relationships with your particular county emergency services is pretty important. Now, going directly to them a lot of times isn't the best way to go, but if you get involved with one of the groups like COAD, the Collaborating Organizations Active in Disasters, or VOAD, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disasters, it gives you a little bit more clout that you're part of a group that they're already familiar with and that they know can be a use during a disaster. So you're more in the loop as to what's going on. I'm not going to say that you get, great communication from them, because it's, to me, it's never as good as you'd like it to be. But it's one of those ways that local emergency services can get to know you and sort of accept you as part of their club.
I'm wondering too, as far as like getting accepted into the club, just a quick poll. Is everyone here familiar with both the COAD and VOAD acronyms? Is there anyone on the call that may not be as familiar? I'm kind of wondering too if this is maybe during the obviously during a time of immense emergency, it's very difficult to do this. But as part of our strategic planning process, I think we should look to pulling some of those COADs and VOADs together and painting kind of a statewide, here's what a COAD and VOAD is, and here are the ones that do exist, and here's how to get the conversation started to form new ones. In my other hat over at the DOnetwork, we've been trying very hard to expand voting access and advocacy opportunities, and we've had immense success through the voter accessibility advisory committees, or VACs, that exist in counties that have adopted the Voters' Choice Act. And we've found that those places where there are really good places to intentionally engage the disability community are really powerful. So it sounds like the COADs and VOADs are a place where the AFN conversations really can take root and take hold. So I'm wondering maybe if we put on a very large kind of road show, of tour of what a VOAD and COAD could look like and do look like, if that would be helpful for our big community.
Russell, the other option is the CERT groups, the local CERT groups that so sometimes when there's no COAD or VOAD, there's a CERT group, and it's just another inroad to getting in that door with your county. Community emergency response team, if everybody isn't familiar with that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those either. So thank you for helping me there. I think that I'm even seeing what do those stand for, and thanks. So there's definitely different levels of knowledge, I think, in the group. And I want to be really mindful of that, because the more accessible that we make all this info, the better we will be. So I want to also share that Marquise has said that he would join that conversation also on presentation. I'm going to share again something that Joe has shared with me in the chat. I know these are for my educational information, and it's very helpful. Thank you, Joe. But I think that I will share it with the group as well, because there's a lot of information here. I'm thinking maybe that another thing that we might want to put together is maybe a glossary. I think glossaries are very powerful tools. And I know that in this particular work, there's even more acronyms than is normal. And there's a lot of acronyms in all of our disability work. So I think that's something we could look at. Now let's go over to Carolyn. Carolyn, did we lose you?
My apology, I was still muted. We found that in our region that it was not enough to belong to the voluntary organizations, because in our area, most of the counties work directly, for example, with CAL FIRE or with the California Office of Emergency Services or with the Department of Rehabilitation. It took our efforts as an independent living center to develop relationships with the individual counties to the point of a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, for our emergency level services. When we were at the VOAD level and when we were at the CERT level, the county treated us as what they called a Good Samaritan organization. And we were not allowed, for example, to go easily into the shelters, to be at the main discussion table. We had to take it a step further to get that recognition, to be at the conversation table and to be able to be on the front line of those emergency services. So that took some relationship building, and it did take a couple of years for us to get that relationship established, to get that MOU. So the sooner you begin, the better, but it's really important to know how your local county and municipal agencies are viewing the volunteer services.
Thanks, Carolyn. There's also an awful lot of, there's a lot of good things in the chat.
Russell, I'm going to start reading the chat box if that's okay. This is Shayna.
That's great. Yeah, I think we're down to our last 15 minutes. So this is a good, I think, good way to kind of wrap our conversation. So go ahead.
Perfect. Let me just, we have some acronyms that were defined. Do you want me to read the acronyms, Russell?
Please, yes.
You got it. We scroll up. So Bruce chimed in and he says, CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. VOAD, V-O-A-D, stands for Volunteer Organizations Active in Disasters. Don writes, attending the local monthly county emergency management operational area meetings can be very informative and a great networking opportunity as well. Bruce adds, CODE, C-O-A-D, stands for community or collaborating. The first word will depend on the county. Organizations active in disasters. Colleen writes, we contacted the Red Cross directly after meeting them at a resources fair after a fire to get a list of accessible evacuation centers that the county and cities could not provide when more fires kept coming. The Red Cross jumped in with boots on the ground and began inspecting the evacuation centers and gave us the information ASAP, and we passed it to the city and the county. Russell has added a message from Joe, and Joe wrote, See page 2, bottom. CPUC does listen to anecdotes per June's point, and the utilities may be directed by the commissioners to provide data. FYI, the utilities report on compliance regularly, and that can be a source of great data for groups like yours. He also listed a link. And Don has thanked the group. End of messages.
Thank you. So I think we've identified a good number of things, honestly, that we can both put into our DOnetwork survey, and also some upcoming community trainings that I'd like to work with you on. I'd also invite those of you that are on the call from independent living centers to invite your systems change staff or other staff that might be involved in outreach to come to the conversations that we're having directly around outreach, especially when we're looking at putting together trainings. So I invite you to maybe have conversation with some of your fellow staff and find out just which of you are working on which pieces of this, because I know sometimes it can be very difficult to be both the person responding to emergency situations and disaster, and also having to carry the load of how to educate and move forward. It can feel very daunting to be working on a systems change while also concurrently supporting people directly. So I want to acknowledge that, and I'm happy to work with any of you directly if you'd like to help maybe putting together some kind of team coordinated plans if that's something that you're interested in.
Russell, this is Carolyn.
Yeah.
I want to add that I also have that dual role. I am a systems change advocate for the center, as well as the emergency services liaison, and I do direct consumer work as well. So it's kind of all three hats. I just switch hats dependent upon the day or week. But if there's any input that I can help provide, especially with making some of those contacts for outreach, and to get those presentations out there so that we can spread that word and get families to safety more quickly. It's a lot of work, yes, but we've learned to piggyback, for example, off of other agencies. Our relationship with other agencies, for example, has gotten us on the local news multiple times, where we've been able to be at resource fairs, getting our equipment there. For example, I might bring a sample battery to a resource fair, and that brings a lot of attention to the table as we're handing out information and answering questions. And it typically also gets the news cameras close by, because they like to see what's going on with these battery backup programs. So I'm happy to help anyone as well. I'll put my email in the chat if anybody has any questions that I can help them with.
That's really, really good. I think that's an excellent demonstration of how you're using external partners to help you do some of the public awareness work. The news media is a great one. There is really very little, they reach everyone, right? So.
And I want to say it really works, because our county level relationship actually got us an interview in a disability column in a national newspaper recently. So it's just built, again, it's being persistent, building those relationships. We started out at the back of the room and just slowly worked our way to the front table. That's just what the process is, but it's definitely worth the effort.
Wow, that's great. Would love to, if you don't mind sharing the link to the article in the chat. I think others might enjoy.
Oh, sure.
Reading.
I'll put that in there.
Great work too. That's really awesome. While we're on this topic, does anyone else have anything that they'd like to brag about? I think we can spend our last 10 minutes here giving ourselves a big brag, right? what's going well in your area? All right, well, thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate that you are learning with me in this space and that we are creating this process as we go along. I am very grateful that you're here with us. Please don't hesitate to email me also at russell@cfilc.org, and I will put that in the chat in just a moment. Carolyn has shared contact info and also the article in the New York Times. That is a huge deal. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for helping us get this issue up in the public spotlight, even in front of the eyes of the world, honestly. So thank you. All right, I will share my name in the chat, and then again, we'll keep this space open if anyone wants to take a second to brag on some of the work or share anything important that you feel like should be our next guidepost, next step. The survey will be being developed. So I hope by the time we have our next meeting, we will have that survey that you all can share with your community, and look forward to moving forward in this next year on some of these big priorities. I know there's a lot of heavy work right now. So please be well.
Thanks, Russell. I also put another link in there for a video for a local news clip article that we had opportunity, and that's one of the tabling events that we tapped into from one of our local volunteer organizations. So we definitely piggyback off of everybody else. Our team is just too small to do it solo.
No, I think Disability Access Center in particular does so much with the resources that you have, and it's really great. I don't think many folks truly understand the size of the area that you serve too.
You know, kind of the scope of it is we're in that Dixie Fire region, and most of our service counties were affected by the 800 square miles that were burning. So that's kind of one way to look at it. But we literally have responsibility for 9 counties. So when you look at the map of Northern California, basically anything north of Yuba City, which is serviced by Freed, our sisters in the northern region, but you go north of Yuba City and it belongs to DAC, to Disability Action Center. So it is a little intimidating, but we have big hearts and big energy, and we just do what we have to do.
Thanks, Carolyn. All right, thank you, everyone.